All right, let's dive in. Today we're taking a deep dive into Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. We're going to uncover some really fascinating stuff hidden beneath the surface of this beloved classic.
Yeah, we're going to look at why this seemingly simple story of love and marriage is still so popular centuries later, and what it says about human nature and social pressures, and of course, Pride and Prejudice.
I mean, you can't talk about Pride and Prejudice without starting with that opening line, right?
Hmm.
It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. It's so iconic, but it's more than just a catchy phrase, right?
Right. Austen is a genius at satire. She's not just stating a fact, she's poking fun at how obsessed society was with marriage, especially for women back then in the 19th century. The whole novel unfolds from this so-called truth.
So it's like she's setting the stage for us to question these societal norms.
Exactly. And through this truth, she critiques the limited options women had, how they depended on marriage for economic security, and how they were pressured to choose wealth over love.
It's like she's letting us in on a little secret, that this is going to be a fun but insightful ride.
Exactly.
And speaking of insights, let's meet the Bennett family, our main players in this whole drama.
The Bennets. They're more than just characters. They each represent different approaches to life and love within the rigid structure of their society.
Okay, so break that down for us.
Well, you've got Mr. Bennet, witty, detached, almost like he's watching this marriage frenzy from the sidelines. Then you have Mrs. Bennet.
The ultimate mama bear.
Exactly. She's this force of nature, totally determined to marry off her daughters no matter what it takes. And through their daughters, especially Jane and Elizabeth, we see the range of choices, or lack thereof, available to women.
Right. So Jane, the eldest, is all beauty and sweetness. All those qualities society prized in a wife back then.
Right.
But Elizabeth, our main character, she's the one who grabs our attention. She's smart, witty, and independent.
And don't forget about Lydia, the youngest. She's impulsive and just wants attention, especially from officers.
Oh, Lydia. Always causing a stir.
But she also highlights what could happen if you defied social norms and just how vulnerable women were back then.
So we've got this family dynamic, all this pressure to marry well, and then, bam, Mr. Bingley arrives, the wealthy bachelor who throws the whole Bennet household into a frenzy.
Bingley's arrival, along with his friend Mr. Darcy, really emphasizes this issue of class. Bingley and Darcy represent the upper crust of society, while the Bennets, although genteel, are definitely a step below.
Oh yeah, that class difference is huge GE in the novel.
It really is, and it fuels a lot of the tension and misunderstandings.
It's like at that first ball at Meryton, that's when Elizabeth's prejudice against Darcy's pride and Darcy's pride at Elizabeth's perceived lower status, that's where it all begins. They make these snap judgments about each other based on, well, pretty superficial observations.
And that's where Austen's social commentary gets even sharper. She's showing how ridiculous a society is that values wealth and status over genuine character.
Okay, so we think we understand what's going on, and then Wickham appears, this charming militia officer who tells everyone about how terribly Darcy treated him. Who wouldn't believe him?
Wickham is so important because he represents this theme of appearance versus reality that's all over the novel. He's charming on the outside, but underneath it all, he's manipulative and destructive.
Even Elizabeth, who's usually so sharp, falls for it.
Right. Austen is warning us about the dangers of judging by first impressions. It's important to look deeper and figure out people's true character.
And Wickham makes us understand why Elizabeth believes him so easily, which makes it even funnier when Mr. Collins enters the picture, this pompous clergyman who sets his sights on Elizabeth. And that proposal scene.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Austen at her comedic best.
Collins's proposal is definitely hilarious, but it also underlines how much pressure women were under to marry, no matter if there was love or if they were compatible.
Like marriage was the only option, basically.
Pretty much. It was how women achieved economic security. And Austen uses humor to show how ridiculous this system is, where a guy like Mr. Collins, with his massive ego and total obliviousness to Elizabeth's feelings, can think he's entitled to her hand in marriage.
But Elizabeth rejects him. She's not going to settle for a comfortable life without love or respect.
Exactly.
But then her friend, Charlotte Lucas, makes a completely different choice. She accepts Collins' proposal.
And that's because she's being practical. She needs financial security. Austen doesn't shy away from showing the economic realities.
It reminds us that love and happiness weren't always the top priorities when it came to marriage back then.
Exactly.
Okay, back to Elizabeth and Darcy. We've seen the sparks fly between them since they first met, and it all explodes during Darcy's first proposal, which is Well, a total disaster.
It is.
He's proud, she's prejudiced, and neither one can see the other clearly. And then, boom, a fiery rejection fueled by all those lies Wickham spread.
Austen's so good at using their clashing personalities to expose what was happening in society. Darcy's pride comes from his social position and his belief that he's better than everyone else. Elizabeth's prejudice comes from how she sees his arrogance and how much she hates the class difference between them.
So their pride and prejudice are like two sides of the same coin, stopping them from seeing the truth about each other.
Absolutely.
But it's this fight, this explosion, that sets the stage for how much they both change.
Exactly. After that awful proposal, Darcy writes Elizabeth that letter. He wants to clear his name and win her over, and it changes everything.
When I first read that letter, I was so mad at Elizabeth for not seeing the real Darcy. But then I realized Austen made us feel that way too. We fall for Wickham's tricks, just like Lizzie does.
That's how brilliant Austen's storytelling is. She pulls us in, the readers, into Elizabeth's journey of self-discovery. We feel the same shock as Elizabeth when Darcy reveals who Wickham really is, explains what happened with Jane and Bingley, and forces us to confront our own limited perspectives.
That letter's like a crack in Elizabeth's worldview. It makes her question everything she thought she knew.
Exactly. And that's where Austen's character development really shines. Elizabeth isn't just passively taking in this information. She's struggling with it, questioning herself, and realizing her own pride might have blinded her.
That's something we can all relate to. We've all misjudged people and let our own biases get in the way. And Elizabeth's willingness to face her flaws is what makes her such a great character, someone we root for.
Absolutely. Yeah, that letter really changes everything, not just for Elizabeth, but for everyone. It forces them to rethink what they thought they knew and to face some hard truths.
But just when Elizabeth starts to question everything about Darcy, we get hit with Lydia's elopement.
It's a huge deal, more than just a romantic adventure. It could ruin the whole Bennet family.
Because a young woman's reputation was everything back then.
Exactly. One wrong step, and she could be completely ostracized, her chances of a good marriage gone. Austen's world might seem light and charming, but the stakes were really high.
And the fact that she runs off with Wickham makes it even worse.
Oh, yeah. He's not just charming, he's dangerous. A predator who uses young women and leaves them heartbroken and financially ruined.
It's like Austen is showing us the dark side of this society. All the manipulation and exploitation hiding under this veneer of politeness.
Exactly.
And the fact that Darcy steps in to save the day, despite his history with Wickham and how much he disapproves of Lydia, it's pretty amazing.
It really shows how much Darcy has changed. He's not doing it for social points or recognition. He's doing it because he understands how vulnerable the Bennets are and what could happen to them.
He's like a knight in shining armor, but without all the bragging and expecting something in return. It shows his integrity and how much he loves Elizabeth, even though she doesn't even know he's involved.
It's also significant because it challenges the rigid social hierarchy of Austen's world. Here's this wealthy, upper-class gentleman willing to help a family of lower social standing, and not out of pity, out of a sense of justice, and because he wants Elizabeth to be happy.
So even though Lydia's elopement throws everything into chaos, it leads to some positive changes too.
Yeah, like Bingley coming back to Netherfield. He's free from his snobby sisters now and ready to pursue Jane again. The obstacles to their happiness are disappearing.
And their engagement sets the stage for Darcy's second proposal to Elizabeth, which is completely different from the first.
Oh, yeah. This time, he's not arrogant or presumptuous. He's humble, sincere, and admits his past mistakes. He's genuinely vulnerable in expressing his love for Elizabeth.
What I love about this second proposal is how much they've both grown.
Exactly. Elizabeth has let go of her prejudice and sees Darcy for who he really is. And Darcy has swallowed his pride and approaches Elizabeth with respect, ready to meet her as an equal.
They've both been through so much, and it's brought them to a place of understanding and acceptance. But it's not over yet. They still have to deal with their families and society's expectations.
And that's what makes Pride and Prejudice so relatable. It's not just a fairy tale. It's about the real challenges of building a relationship.
Let's take a step back from the main plot for a second and appreciate some of those smaller details that make this novel so great. All the humor, social commentary, and Austen's sharp observations about people.
One of my favorite things is how Austen uses a technique called free indirect discourse. It lets us experience the story through Elizabeth's eyes, even though there's a narrator.
To be honest, I'm not sure I completely understand that. Can you break it down for us?
Sure, it's like we're in Elizabeth's head, hearing her thoughts, judgments, and all her sarcastic little comments. Austen doesn't just tell us what Elizabeth feels. She shows us through the words, the tone, and by blending different perspectives together. That's what makes Elizabeth feel so real, so relatable, even when we disagree with her.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. Like those times when Elizabeth is watching a social gathering and we get her inner commentary, her witty take on everyone and their silly behavior.
Exactly. And through this technique, we get to know Elizabeth really well, but we also experience the world of the novel in all its complexity. We feel those social expectations, the excitement of the romance, and the humor of all those awkward moments that Austen is so good at capturing.
Like that scene where Mr. Collins proposes to Elizabeth and then says, I am not now to learn that it is natural for young ladies to reject the addresses of the man whom they secretly mean to accept when he first applies for their favor. He's so clueless, and we feel Elizabeth's embarrassment so intensely.
Austen is so good at using those moments to make fun of society. She's not just criticizing, she's inviting us to laugh at how absurd some social customs are and at the characters who believe in them so strongly.
And Mrs. Bennet, oh my gosh, every time she speaks, it's either hilarious or a total cringe fest.
Remember when she makes Jane go to Netherfield on horseback even though it's obviously going to rain?
Classic Mrs. Bennet, always scheming and trying to get her daughters married off.
And it works. Jane gets soaked, has to stay at Netherfield, and Mrs. Bennet is thrilled. Those little moments of scheming and manipulation add so much to the story.
And then there are all those awkward moments, like when Mr. Collins completely misinterprets Elizabeth's politeness and thinks she's interested in him.
Oh, yeah. That scene at the Netherfield ball is amazing. He interrupts Darcy and Elizabeth, totally oblivious to how much they want him to go away, and starts going on and on about Lady Catherine de Bourgh and how important he is. It's so awkward, but also hilarious.
Austen makes those moments of social awkwardness and miscommunication so real. Her characters aren't perfect romantic heroes. They're just people trying to figure out this complicated world with all its unspoken rules.
It's like Austen is showing us a mirror reflecting society's grand balls and elegant drawing rooms, but also all the pettiness, anxieties, and absurdity.
And she does it all with such wit and irony. She's observing this world with a sharp eye and a sharp tongue, but she's also fond of these characters and their struggles.
That's what makes Pride and Prejudice so great. It's social commentary, witty observations, and genuine heart all rolled into one.
It makes you laugh, makes you think, and makes you feel connected to the characters. But I'm curious, besides all the funny moments, what are some of your favorite passages or quotes? What really stands out to you?
There's one line that always gets me. It's when Elizabeth reads Darcy's letter and starts to realize her own prejudices. She says, I, who have prided myself on my discernment, I, who have valued myself on my abilities, who have often disdained the generous candor of my sister and gratified my vanity in useless or blamable distrust. It's so honest and self-aware. She's admitting her own pride has blinded her.
That is a powerful line. It shows Elizabeth's vulnerability and willingness to admit she's wrong.
And that's what makes her such a great character. She's not perfect, she makes mistakes, but she learns from them.
It's those moments of self-awareness that make this novel more than just a romance. It becomes a story about human nature, overcoming our biases, and how powerful forgiveness and understanding can be. But let's get back to those little details that make Pride and Prejudice so enjoyable.
One of my favorites is how Austen uses places to symbolize the characters and their worlds. Pemberley, Darcy's estate, isn't just a beautiful setting. It represents his character, his refined taste, his generosity, and his responsibility.
Pemberley is like an extension of Darcy himself, a reflection of his inner goodness. And it's the opposite of Rosings, Lady Catherine de Bourgh's estate.
Oh yeah, Rosings is so stuffy and oppressive. It's all about rules and decorum. While Pemberley feels open and welcoming, like it represents a more enlightened way of thinking.
By showing us these contrasting places, Austen reveals what her characters truly value.
Exactly.
And it's not just places, it's those little details of behavior, the gestures and expressions that say so much.
Like how awkward Darcy is around Elizabeth at first. He's attracted to her, but he's so proud and uptight that he can't express his feelings naturally.
Oh, I remember when he refuses to dance with her at the Meryton Assembly.
Mm.
He says there's no one there handsome enough to tempt me. What a blunder. He just comes off as arrogant, which of course makes Elizabeth even more prejudiced against him.
And then there's Elizabeth, with her wit and sharp observations. She sees right through people's pretenses and their ridiculous attempts to impress each other.
One of my favorite lines is when she describes Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins was not a sensible man, and the deficiency of nature had been but little assisted by education or society. Ouch.
Austen can say so much with just a few words. She doesn't need long descriptions. She can sum up a character perfectly in a single sentence.
And her characters are so well developed. Even the ones who seem unlikable at first, like Darcy or even Mr. Collins, you start to see their humanity.
Even Lady Catherine de Bourgh, who's so controlling and obsessed with status, there's a vulnerability there. She's afraid of losing control, which makes sense given the limited options women of her class had.
That's a good point. She's a product of her time. And while we might not like her methods, we can understand what motivates her.
That's what makes Austen such a great writer. Her characters feel real. They might live in 19th century England, but their struggles with love, family, and trying to find their place in the world are still relevant today.
I think that's why Pride and Prejudice is so timeless. It's a story that resonates with our own experiences, our own struggles with pride, prejudice, and relationships. It reminds us that even in a world full of rules and expectations, there's room for personal growth, second chances, and the power of love. We've talked about a lot, haven't we? The satire, the social dynamics, all those little details that make Pride and Prejudice so fun to read. But there's one thing I really want to dig into a bit deeper.
I think I know what you're getting at. We can't ignore it, right? The elephant in the room.
Exactly. Money and social mobility.
Right. It's always there, under the surface, driving all the drama and conflict. Think about Mrs. Bennet and how obsessed she is with getting her daughters married. It's not just about finding husbands.
It's about their financial future.
Yes. Remember what Mr. Bennet says about his estate? That it's entailed, and it's all going to Mr. Collins.
Oh, yeah. Because it can't be inherited by a woman.
Right, and that's not just a random plot point. Austen's showing us how vulnerable women were back then.
It's like a ticking time bomb for the Bennets.
Yeah.
If Mr. Bennet dies, his wife and daughters are left with nothing. Totally dependent on this cousin they barely even know.
Exactly, and that's why Charlotte Lucas's decision to marry Mr. Collins, even though it seems so unromantic, makes sense. She's being realistic.
She's choosing security over love.
Right, which a lot of women had to do back then. It makes Elizabeth's rejection of Collins even more daring.
She's putting love and compatibility above financial security. Pretty radical for her time.
It really is.
But even Elizabeth is drawn to wealth and status, at least at first.
Oh, absolutely. Think about Wickham. Part of his appeal is definitely his charm, but it's also those lies he tells about Darcy cheating him out of his inheritance.
Oh, yeah. He plays on Elizabeth's own prejudices against the wealthy. She already thinks Darcy is arrogant, so she believes the worst about him.
Wickham knows how to exploit those social anxieties. He pretends to be the victim to gain sympathy and get what he wants.
So Austen's showing us how dangerous it is to value appearances over substance, wealth, and status over character.
Exactly. And Wickham's downfall really reinforces that message about true worth. It's not about money, it's about how you use it.
And that's what Darcy demonstrates, especially when he steps in to resolve the whole Lydia situation. He uses his resources to protect the Bennets, even though it could hurt his own reputation.
It shows his true character. He's not like Wickham at all.
And Pemberley, Darcy's estate, is so important too. It's not just a fancy house. It represents a different kind of wealth.
One that's tied to responsibility.
Exactly. It's like Pemberley is the ideal of what a good landowner should be. Someone who takes care of their people and uses their wealth to create a thriving community.
And it's not a coincidence that Elizabeth's opinion of Darcy changes after visiting Pemberley. She sees how he uses his wealth, how he treats his tenants.
It's like she finally sees past her prejudice and realizes that true worth isn't about money.
Exactly. It's about character and doing what's right. That's a powerful message, even today.
It really is. In a world obsessed with money and status, Pride and Prejudice reminds us to look deeper and appreciate the qualities that truly matter. Kindness, compassion, integrity. So we've reached the end of our deep dive into Pride and Prejudice. It's amazing how much there is to discover in this seemingly simple story.
It really is. It makes you think, it makes you laugh, and it reminds us that love and forgiveness can change everything.
It's a novel that still resonates with readers today because it captures those universal human experiences we all share. The challenges of love and family, the pressure to fit in, and the desire to find our own path in the world. So we encourage you to pick up Pride and Prejudice again, read it with fresh eyes, and discover all the hidden depths and brilliant observations that make it a masterpiece. And if you're looking for more deep dives into your favorite books, be sure to subscribe and join us on our next literary adventure. Happy reading!